Well, greetings and welcome to episode 137 of Bible 180, 180 episodes between Genesis and Revelation. Today we're on two stories of healing of Jesus in John chapters 4 and 5. And remember that Matthew, Mark, and Luke report what Jesus did. John interprets what Jesus did. Very important distinction. John is more of a theological gospel. The other ones are more of a let's tell the story kind of gospel. So, chapter 4, verses 46 through 51. Then Jesus came again to Cana in Galilee, where he had changed the water into wine. Now there was a royal official whose son lay ill in Capernaum. When he heard that Jesus had come to Judea, to Galilee, he went and begged him to come and heal his son, for he was at the point of death. And Jesus said to him, "Unless you see signs and wonders, you will not believe." The official said to him, Sir, come down before my little boy dies." And Jesus said to him, "Go, your son will live." The man believed the word that Jesus spoke to him and started on his way. As he was going down, his slaves came and told him that his child was alive. So he asked them what hour he began to recover. And they said to him, "Yesterday, about 1 in the afternoon, the fever left him." The father realized that this was the very hour that Jesus had said to him, "Your son will live." So he himself believed, along with his whole household. Now this was the second sign that Jesus did in Capernaum of Galilee. Now, Jesus went to the place where he made water into wine. He returned to that place of his first sign. Now, this healing of the official's son is the second sign. 18 miles from Cana to Galilee, on the other side of the Sea of Galilee. And so when the royal official heard that Jesus had come to Cana in Galilee, he went even though he walked then 18 miles from Capernaum to Cana in Galilee. He walked that distance, walking the whole way, 18 miles on dusty, hot roads. The royal official likely didn't spend any time getting there, so he packed up his backpack with a ham sandwich. Probably not a ham sandwich because they don't eat pork. Nalgene water bottle. He walked 4 to 5 hours to see Jesus. He arrived weary, and he didn't know much except he wanted his son to be well. And notice the interaction. He begged Jesus to come down 18 miles and heal his son. He begged because his son was only getting worse. And Jesus said, "Unless you see signs and wonders, you will not believe." Jesus, it seems, kind of puts him off, but nonetheless, the royal official persisted and said to Jesus, "Sir, come down before my little boy dies." Jesus says, "Go and your son will live." And what the interesting thing is that the royal official then left. He went back. He believed the word that Jesus spoke to him and started on his way. The first part of the miracle here is not only the healing of the son, but the royal official believed in the word of Jesus. He took Jesus at his word. He didn't get the answer he wanted. The answer he wanted was Jesus to say to him, "I'll be right there." Instead, he didn't get the actions of Jesus. He got the word of Jesus. "Go and your son will be healed." So really the first miracle is that he took Jesus at his word. He didn't get what he wanted, but he took steps back. He started to go back home. He took Jesus at his word. And then the miracle continues. As he was going down, remember the 10 lepers, as they went, they were healed. As he was going down, the slaves met him and told him that his child was alive. So he said, "Well, what time did he get to be better?" They said, 1 in the afternoon, the same time that Jesus said, "Your son will be good." So the verses end, so he himself believed and his entire household. Now this was the second sign. Remember, Jesus did second signs, 7 I ams, 7 miracles. changing water into wine was the first sign. Now this was the second. Remember how at the end of John's gospel, now these things are written that you might believe, like the royal official believed in his whole household, believe that Jesus is the Son of God, and that believing you might have life in his name. So a second story that we're going to talk about is the beginning verses of chapter 5, right next. After this, the healing of the royal official's son, there was a festival of the Jews, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem now. Now in Jerusalem by the Sheep's Gate, there's a pool in Hebrew called Bethesda, which has 5 porticos. In these lay many invalids, blind, lame, and paralyzed. One man was there who had been ill for 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there and knew he had been there a long time, he said to him, "Do you want to be made well?" The man said to him, "Sir, I have no one to put me into the pool when the water is stirred up, and while I make my way, someone else steps down ahead of me." Jesus said to him, "Stand up, take your mat, and walk." At once the man was made well, and he took up his mat and began to walk. I love that story. Here's a man who had been at the pool of Bethsaida for 38 years. Think of that. That's a very, very long time. It's not 40 years, which is a biblical symbolic for a very, very long time, but 38 years of helplessness and hopelessness. He had a condition where he couldn't walk. He was just stuck where he was at day after day. 38 years stuck and waiting patiently for something to happen. Now notice what does happen. Jesus was in Jerusalem for one of the festivals where there's many more people in Jerusalem than normal, and he went to the pool of Bethsaida, and there's a boatload of people there, people with issues, blind, lame, paralyzed. Jesus goes to the festival, right to the place where the most hurting people are in all of Jerusalem. All kinds of people must have been in Jerusalem, and boatload of hurting people there. And Jesus, notice he didn't walk in, wave his hand, and said, "You all get well." Instead, in the midst of all of the suffering, Jesus looked past the crowds and saw one person. He thought about one person. And he finds that guy who had been there for 38 years. And he says to him, "Do you want to be made well?" What do you think about that's kind of one of the biggest questions in the Bible. Do you want to be made well? I mean, what's a guy going to say? "No, I've been fine. I've been here for 38 years. I kind of got used to the waiting. So I've made some good friends here. We play pinochle every once in a while. No, I'm just fine." But it wasn't a trick question. Jesus said, "Do you want to be made well?" He wants to draw out the thinking process of the one who had been there lying for 38 years. Do you want to think differently than you had for the previous 38 years? And interesting what happens next. After asking a man who had been there for 38 years, "Do you want to be made well?" the man says, "Sir, I have no one to put me into the pool when the water is stirred up, and while I'm making my way down, someone else steps in front of me." Now, do you hear what he's saying? He's only focused on the solution that he had created for himself to get unstuck. You see, they thought in Jesus' time that when the waters in the pool of Bethsaida were stirred up, that meant that the healing power of God was present. It was a superstition at that time that an angel would come down and stir up the water, and then the first person who would get into that water would be healed. And so the man thought, in his stuckness for 38 years, that if only he could get someone to help him into the water, that he could be healed. The man was so thinking about his own solution that it got in the way of God's solution for his life. He wanted a quicker way into the pool, but in reality, what he needed to do was to know Jesus. What's interesting is that what Jesus doesn't do, Jesus doesn't do anything right away. He doesn't respond to the man saying, there's no one to help me in the pool, by saying, well, why don't I just wait around till the water is stirred up and I'll help you into the pool? Jesus also didn't say, let me help you with your solution. Jesus also doesn't dismiss or negate the man's solution by saying, you know, dude, that's just superstition and it really isn't true in the first place. Jesus doesn't put him down, but he also doesn't enter into a theological debate with him about the man's superstition or his theological inadequacies. Jesus doesn't say there's no angel. Jesus doesn't do anything right away, nor does he try to make this man more uncomfortable than he already is. Jesus doesn't say, well, why don't I get one of those My Pillow pillows and you can just kind of take it easy. Jesus says, stand up, take up your mat and walk. When he followed what Jesus said, he was miraculously healed. When he obeyed what Jesus was asking him to do, all it started with was Jesus saying, do you want to be healed? 3 parts of that. Jesus says, stand up, take up your mat, and walk. If you want to get unstuck from where you are, stand up, take up your mat, and walk. Stand up means when we're stuck in life, stand up. Get outside. Get away from social media. Get away from scrolling. Get a counselor. Go to wherever you need to do. Clean the garage. Get up when you're stuck. Get out and do something rather than just sitting, focusing on yourself. Take up your mat, he says. Make a clean break with your past. See, the mat kind of represents the man's past. Don't hang out with the bad crowd you've been hanging out with. Quit watching bad TV. Maybe start watching Hallmark reruns, but take up your mat. Get out of where your stuckness is and start being productive and walk. Walk into a new way of being with Jesus. Walk, move, walk into a new way of being. Stand up, take up your mat, and walk. Get to know more, think more, believe more, pray more. Do what it takes to develop an even deeper relationship with Jesus. Wonderful stories where Jesus kind of breaks into our kind of old way of thinking. Though the royal official, come and heal him. He believes as he went, he was healed. The man at the pool of Bethsaida, 38 years. Jesus says, get up, focus in a new way. The old stuff isn't working anymore. Focus in a new way. Know me. Know the life that I wish to give you. You take care, and until I see you in the next episode, just take care of yourself and be grateful. Talk to you again in the next episode. Bye-bye.